The name of the workshop is a history, treatment, and recovery. And she's going to talk for a little while, but I think she's interested in what you want to know. And that's very unusual because a lot of people don't really care sometimes what we want to know. But Mrs. Delaney does, and she wants to hear from you. So what we're going to do is we're going to have her talk for a little bit, and then you're going to be invited to ask her questions. And we don't have a traveling microphone, so I'll let her work out the particulars on how she wants to handle that. But I'll be here to repeat the questions if need be. And we want you to participate, and I think that's great. Do you all know Mrs. Delaney? Okay, so I don't need to say a word, do I? Okay, so I will stop talking, and I will give you Geraldine O. Delaney.
You didn't know this was an antique show, did you? They looked around and they found the oldest antique that they could find, and they said, "Jerry, you come on down and show them that you don't have to die. You can live. Lord doesn't want me and the devil can't choose me," and so here I am. Everybody says, "How old is she?" She is 89, pushing... So far, I've only killed 3 husbands. I'm not thinking of taking on another one. And it seems that the Lord doesn't want me and the devil can't use me. So you're going to have to put up with me at least this afternoon, because they asked me to talk about the old times. Well, now, I'm not real sure what the old times are, but I've been sober now 49 years, and before that my brother came into AA 6.5 years, and the person who came to see him was our beloved Bill Wilson. I was stationed at the Mayo Clinic, and I had a moral leper brother who drank too much, and I had to call for help. And you know, people as strong as I am don't like to have to call for help, but he wouldn't stop drinking, and I kept getting these telephone calls from his family, and I didn't like it. So what we did was I called a child psychiatrist, which I always thought was most appropriate, because all of these bratty men act like children. Not women, you understand that. Just bratty men. And that bratty man was acting up, and I called Dr. James Plant. No one ever seems to have heard of him, but he was a child psychiatrist in Newark, and asked him what to do with that moral leper brother of mine, and he didn't know either, except that he'd heard a guy by the name of Bill Wilson at the New York Medical Society doing something funny with men who drank too much. And he'd call him up. He said the guy gave him a card, said I think his name was Bill Wilson, and it was. And he called Bill, and Bill went that afternoon from New York to Maplewood, New Jersey, to see my brother, who never drank again. And that's a long time ago. And it took me quite a little while to discover that I was worse than he was. But you see, they didn't want women in that nice little men's organization of theirs. Fortunately, there were 2 Helens lived in South Orange and thereabouts who were going, and they let me sit with them when they were there, or the wives, and I'm very grateful to the wives of the recovering male alcoholics, because they took good care of me and were very good to me. And in those days, they didn't have a wonderful meeting like this. And incidentally, I want to congratulate the people who put this conference together, I remember when there weren't any halfway houses. I remember when there wasn't any place you could send people. There weren't any treatment places. Ina Trevis went to work after she had been in a place up in Connecticut, and she was wanted to work with alcoholics, so the only job open was that of cook. But there was only two problems with that. She couldn't cook, and she was afraid of bugs. And the kitchen in that baronial castle on Route 46 was in the basement, and it had mud floor, and you pulled the wheels up on a dumb waiter. But you know something? She believed in what she wanted to do, help people who drank too much. She didn't know anything about drugs. I was a drug artist because I worked with a bunch of professors from the medical school in Northwestern, and we had a nice big pharmacy, and you go back and fill your pockets full and throw in a couple in case you got nervous. And I was nervous all the time, and why I didn't kill myself, it just comes down to the fact that the Lord didn't want me and the devil couldn't choose me. And here I am, kicking around, just celebrated my 89th anniversary, birthday I should say, and my 49th anniversary in AA. Don't congratulate me, I only did it one day at a time. You know, if somebody had told me you've got to stay sober a year, I wouldn't have done it. And so when you're talking to new people, even though you think they know about AA, don't put the heat on. Say, just today, let's try being sober today. And if another day comes, it'll be today, and you can start all over again. And if we make it too difficult, the first thing you know, if we get to be too intellectual on this, an awful lot of the drugs are going to take off again, and they might not have another chance. That's the part that bothers me. It's not what they do or what they say or how they act, but will God give them another chance at recovery? And we are the people who carry the message in our hands. And in my day, they told us to kiss a lot. I thought that was fine. I was single. But it was keep it simple, stupid. And that stupid never appealed to me. Because I'm bright. You understand that. I'm much brighter than my brother. He drank too much. But he never got in all the nut houses that I got locked up in. And I traveled 10 months out of the year with about 8 to 10 doctors. And they wanted to travel a fast track, and I didn't mind joining them. And I didn't cost me anything, so it didn't cost them anything either. We ran around the country and gave exams for people's efficiency, half bombed. And you know, when we look at the alcoholics and the people who treat them individually, if you flashed your life across the screen, how would it look? I ask of the treating people, have you taken an inventory recently? And not just once in a while, a daily one and a full-scale one at least once a year. Look at you. Who are you? Do you want a child of yours to be just like you? If you don't, how are you going to change? If you're asking them to follow You say, follow me, do as I do, not as I say. But we need, as treating people, to take an inventory, at least once a year and oftener if we need it, to look at who we are. Well, you say, I'm not alcoholic. Well, that is a point against you. I'm not even married to an alcoholic. That's about 10 points against you. Well, I've had a good education. Define good for me. Does it provide you with the emotional attitude that you need to help the very sick addict? You say, well, I just deal with alcohol. You know, Dr. Gitlow used to tell me that the pills were nothing but dehydrated alcohol anyhow. And I believe him, because they don't smell, which makes them easier to take, and you can take them more often without realizing what you're getting, whereas your bottle goes down, you can see it. And you've got to look at you. How do you feel about the, quote, druggies? I see some treating people in the alcohol field say, I don't want to deal with the druggies. Yet they're dealing with the oldest known drug of addiction. You say, well, I'm not like that. When did you take your last inventory? When did you write your life story? Any of you write a life story? Don't put your hand up, because I know you're a bunch of liars. Takes one to know one, you know. But we ask people to write their life stories very often in treatment. And did you write yours? Do you know where you are? What are you doing to work on the things that are not so good for you? Oh, you say, I'm perfect. Well, why hasn't the Lord taken you? Oh, no. He says, no, I don't want that one. I have to wait a while on that. And so, as you do this, take a look at you. And as you're taking a look at you, you will find that it makes it easier for you to look at other people. I don't think it's easy treating the alcoholic. And yet, I've been at it for a good many years. I was in pediatrics before that, and I think that that's a very good combination. Pediatrics to alcoholism, not such a far step. But we have to honestly look at ourselves. People say, well, how do I look at myself? Well, why don't you write it down? Simply. Don't leave it around where anybody might find it. And when you get it all done, let it get cold. And then when nobody's home, you go in the bathroom and read it out loud to yourself in the mirror, looking yourself in the eye as much as you can. I'll be surprised if you don't tear the first one up and throw it in the wastebasket. Because we have a hard time not lying to us about us. And I don't care whether you're new in the field or old, and I don't care whether you're alcoholic or non-alcoholic. I think the alcoholics have an advantage over you non-alcoholics. With the same education, you still have an understanding that God gave you that is hard come by. I don't think this is an easy field to work in. Maybe you do. But I think I've worked in it a bit longer, perhaps, than you have. And I don't think it's easy. If you're going to do a good job, I have a reputation of being very tough. And they say, oh, you're mean. I say, well, if it works, don't fix it. And, you know, I don't care what works in you. I'm not running a popularity contest. Are you? Or are you trying to help people recover These are the hard things for us to look at as we go along. And the knowledge of the program is necessary. For those of you who are alcoholic, I say to you, how often do you go to meetings? What kind of meetings do you go to? I go to meetings, and I don't talk at meetings. They say, well, why don't you talk? I said, I came to listen. It's me that needs the help. And I can't with my big fat mouth open. And it's hard for me to keep my mouth shut. It isn't easy, but it does good. And I wonder, for those of you who have Al-Anon ties, are you going to meetings? Well, I go once in a while. I don't really need it now. Blah, 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 blah. You've lied to yourself so much you don't even know you're lying now. You say, well, you say we're all liars. Yeah. We have a hard time telling ourselves the whole truth. We'll go this far, and then say, well, the rest doesn't make any difference. And we slough it off. But let me tell you something. You'll wish you hadn't someday. And I urge you to do an inventory of yourselves at least once a year, a thorough inventory, and talk to somebody about it. Whether you're an addict or not. You know, many of the things that Alcoholics Anonymous teaches us are just as good to the non-alcoholic as they are to the alcoholic. And we're going around everything, every disease you have, every illness, every quirk. What you need is group therapy. AA is the finest group therapy known to man, available all over the world, free of charge. So we have the greatest disease to deal with in the whole world, because other diseases don't provide all of these things. And there they are for you. You say, well, I'm not alcoholic. Does it say on the door, if you aren't alcoholic, don't come in? Do you have any alcoholic friends? How did you get interested in this disease? How did you get in this field? Drinking pink tea? No. How did I get in this field? I didn't want in this field. I was in pediatrics. But you know, the philosophy of living one day at a time, of having rules and regulations and following them, and guidelines, and believing in higher power, and all of the nice things that come with AA, help regardless of who you are and what you are. And this is how I have worked in this field for so many years. As I say, I'm 49 years sober, and I worked in pediatrics before that, and they fit together very nicely with no problem at all. And I'm glad that I'm an alcoholic, because I might have missed this wonderful, wonderful philosophy. Well, you say, couldn't you have gotten it in religion? Well, my family was a little quirky. My father was a hard-shell Baptist. My mother was a Methodist. My brother was a Presbyterian. And I married a 50-year-old Roman Catholic bachelor, complete with aged mother. I just wanted to cover all fronts. And I got them. Woo-hoo! My husband, my Irish husband, taught me a great deal. We had 20 years of good marriage. When we went to meetings, and that was every night, we separated. And he went with his friends, and I went with mine. But I was the kind that took all the medicines because I was in the doctor's office. And he was the kind that didn't know anything about medicine and wouldn't listen to find out. And he had a bad back, and somebody gave him some pills for his bad back and said, "Don't tell Jerry, she's a nut on those things." And he didn't, and it helped his back. And he had a bad cigarette cough, and the same thing happened with that. And after 20 years of good sobriety, head of intergroup, all success in the world, guess what? He picked up a drink. And he was in 14 hospitals in 17 months. And he bled to death of esophageal varices. This is a patient disease, my friends. It'll wait for people forever. And we must continue. We can't say, "Well, that's all. I can't do anything for you." Leave the line open so they can get you once in a while if they need help. You say, "Well, I haven't got anything to give them." How do you know whether you've got anything to give them or not? You try, and if there's something there, it helps. God will make the decision, not you. "Well, I don't believe in God." I didn't either when I came to the program. And some very smart young man said, "What about good, orderly direction?" And you know, that took the religion right out of the picture. Because I got good, orderly direction from what I now choose to call my higher power. But we have got to be flexible. Not completely bend in the middle, but be willing to listen to what people are really saying. Or you say, "That's too simple." That's the kiss a lot. Keep it simple, stupid. And, you listen, and it helps from time to time. The thing is that we need to know that we're all talking about the same thing when we're talking to clients or to friends or to family. Are we talking about the same thing? You use words. Do you all have the same meaning? Do you ever ask people that you're talking to what they mean by certain words they use? Very often you say, "I know, I'm smart." You're just so damn smart you kill yourself. And because you are afraid somebody will think that you're dumb, and then they find out that you really are. Somebody gave me a sign in a hospital office that read, "The sign of God is that we will be led in a way that we do not plan to go." And let me tell you something, I never planned to get in the alcohol field. Anybody home? Tell them you just went out. Those things they always make me jump about 10 feet. If I ever wore one, I'd never be sane again. I don't know that I'm sane now. That's the nice part about the group therapy of this group. You make me feel good. You make me say, "Oh, goody, goody, I'm a best of the lot." No, but you make me feel as though I might have one word to pass on to you. And the words I have is for the therapist, whether they're alcoholic or not. Don't drink. Don't take the drugs. go to some group meetings and shut up and listen. That's what Bill Wilson used to say to me. Jerry, don't drink, don't take those pills, go to meetings. And then he'd scream at me, and shut up and listen. Oh, nasty man. But that's true, and I've been talking now too long, and I'd rather answer your questions than to keep right on talking, because while I may be talking about the things that I like, you may have questions about the early days. Incidentally, they didn't want women. I was number 4 woman in New Jersey, and the other 2 of them were named Helen, and they both were on my case, and so I never knew which Helen it was, but it was hell. But the thing is that now you see many more women in the programs, whether it's the family or the alcoholic. And incidentally, I still feel that the major part of the program should go towards family. I feel that the family need help almost more than the alcoholic, because they hurt so bad. They have the pain. The alcoholic doesn't know what pain is. They're half embalmed already, and they don't pay attention. But the family takes the brunt of the whole thing. And so it is, I believe, that if the halfway houses will not only help the alcoholic, but help the family. You say, well, most of them have lost their family. They might get some of them back if the family began to understand. And that's the way that it should be. This is why we suggest that the family go to all meetings. In my day, everybody, the whole family, the kids and everybody else, went to meetings. And afterwards, if they had special problems, they broke off in little groups. And it was really very helpful. And I do believe that the family who's sober all the time suffer more than folks like me who are bummed. But these are just ideas of mine from an old-timer, long-timer, old and long-timer. It all goes, everybody says, says, how old are you? Well, the Lord willing, I'm on my way to being 90. And I think I'll make it, one day at a time. The Lord doesn't want me and the devil can't choose me. And if I don't shut up, you won't either. Would somebody like to ask some questions? Get my whiskey. Whiskey makes you frisky, they tell me.
Sue and I'm an alcoholic. Could you please give us a little history of how you started Alina Lodge?
How did I start Alina Lodge?
Yes.
I didn't start it, unfortunately. I loaned some money to a little German girl by the name of Ina Rudolph Trebus. She had worked in a halfway house, but it wasn't called that. It was just sort of a residence on Route 46. And she wanted to have a place of her own. And she finally found the place. A God-forsaken place up in the hills, when they went with one stone house that was part of George Washington's headquarters for the slaves, and a lean-to and a carriage house that had floor like this so the carriages wouldn't roll out in the road, and a barn full of manure. But that woman had a dream, and she saw something, and she was determined to have it. And she came to me and she asked to borrow money in 5 figures for just a couple of weeks until her mortgage came through. And I want you to know, my friends, if you think I'm bright, I'm not. Because I said, I don't have that kind of money, Ina. She said, yeah, but you have credit and you can borrow it. And I went to the bank and borrowed it. And let her have it with no notes. She dropped dead just as we were forming a corporation to help her run it. And guess who had to go and work to get the money out? And guess who's never been able to get out of it since? You know, if you're going to be stupid, be good and stupid, and I was. But you know something? I think the Lord pushes all of us into some of these things. How many of you here that are in the treatment field plan to get into alcoholism? What's the matter? Nobody planned. This was not a field that you would choose normally, but you got pushed into it one way or another. And sometimes God has to push us a little. We're a little stubborn. We're not the easiest people in the world to get along with, you know. You say, well, I'm not alcoholic. Well, maybe you married one, and that makes you even worse. So that's the way it goes. Who else has a question?
Geraldine, with all the cutbacks that you hear about today, I know that you had some financial problems and you had some worries and some concerns when you were opening up. How did you deal with those kinds of financial insecurity that you had before?
Well, number one, I didn't have any plans because Ina just dropped dead. We were having a meeting of 5 people who were going to form a board of trustees, and she was to be there at 11 o'clock at my house in Hibernia, and she didn't come. And when we called up out there, we found out she'd dropped dead. She had a bad heart, and we didn't know it. So we grew like Topsy. I was fortunate. You know, there's some advantages to being old. And I had a lot of wealthy friends in those days in Wall Street. And I tapped them pretty heavily for some money. And I'm a bit persuasive when I get tapping. And we have kept the fees down by not building or adding on or raising salaries until we had the money in the till. Now, that isn't the popular way to do it. The popular way to do it is to go into debt. No, this isn't a good area. And so, while I had these wealthy friends, I refused to build any buildings until the money was in the till. Cash, not pledges. And I refused to and I cried poor mouth like crazy. But you know, I don't know how many of you have been out to see the lodge, and if you'd like to see it sometime, you can call, and Mr. Mel, who's taken my place, will be glad to show you around. If I'm around, I will too. But you know, I refuse to build buildings or go into debt, because this isn't a popular disease even yet. And when you run on a cash basis, then you don't have a lot of worries. You don't get in over your head, and you don't have to try to cut corners to get away with things. People say, well, that's hard to do, but I remember standing at a window in one of the buildings looking out into an orchard and saying to the man with me, Ed, I see a building out there. He said, God damn it, Jerry, if you don't stop drinking, I'm going to put you in rehab. I said, I still see it. And you better too. He was a Wall Street broker, and he did see it, and we did get the building, and it is going. And you say, well, you're a tough worker. But remember that when I came out here, I didn't know any of these people when I first got sober. But I had a lot of faith. I'm not a religious person. I don't care what your church is or how you worship your God. It doesn't make any difference to me. But if you're going to live and you're going to enjoy life and you're going to enjoy your job, you better believe in something outside yourself. Because we're not that good, you know. And as I say, my father was a hard-shell Baptist, and he believed, but not in the things that I believed in. And my family were all dead by that time. But I had faith, and I was willing to work hard. I've cooked at that place, and I've scrubbed, and I've cleaned, and I've taken care of students. I've done a lot of things that I did not plan to do. And you know, that's one of the things that we have to realize is that God is going to give us a lot of things that we didn't plan to do. We can't tell Him what to do. We can try, but it's not going to work. And it's hard work. It's hard work. And the little gifts are often the best kind because it gets people interested and they know somebody. And we're a non-profit corporation, and believe me, we're non-profit. But we keep going. Because there are still some very sick people. Just remember that you say, well, I don't want to take care of the druggies. Well, alcohol is the oldest known drug of addiction. Don't forget it, my friend. It just stinks a little, and you can drink it. The other things you can swallow by the handful, and that's how I became a druggie. I was in an office with 8 doctors, and we had a pharmacy, and I'd go back in the pharmacy and fill my pockets full of anything that happened to be around, throw in a few in case I got nervous. It almost killed me. But it didn't. Why? I think the God that I didn't believe in, that I called good orderly direction, made me do the things that I didn't want to do. And you will be led in directions that you don't want to go. Just forget that idea that everything's going to be sweetness and light in your life. No way. No way. You'll have enough to balance the whole thing if you'll let go and let God. And you do the work. You're the kid that does the work. He does the thinking and the dreaming. And you do the work. I didn't want to stay out there, and I wasn't going to. No, not me. I'd only been sober 10 years. That's 39 years ago. Did I get so I liked it? I liked it better than. I liked it better than seeing people go get drunk. I liked it better than seeing families suffer. I liked it better than saying, I don't care. You say, well, did it help you stay sober? It did not. My sobriety had to come in the usual way from going to meetings and helping people in a different sort of way. This isn't easy. The running of the halfway houses. Actually, we thought of our place as a halfway house in the beginning. And I got to working with the halfway houses, and I've always liked it. It's halfway home, or halfway to living on your own. And it's a wonderful, wonderful concept to know that you can take it one step at a time instead of having to make the leap and not knowing where you're going to land. I think of all the things that are necessary in this field, the halfway houses are the most needed. And I think we need more of them. Small units. Doesn't have to be large unit. We had one place in East Orange where my husband's office was, where we had 4 at a time there that went out and worked and were under supervision. We didn't call it a halfway house, but that's what it was. We had supervision. Who has another question? I see the line out. Here's.
Mrs. Delaney, thank you. I know you were around in Prohibition, and I've heard you talk about that, and I'm just curious about what you feel about legalizing drugs.
I think we're out of our mind to think about legalizing drugs because we know so little about the reaction of drugs that are not liquid like alcohol. We know a good deal about the reaction of alcohol on certain people, but we do not know how the pills are going to affect people. And it's a rough deal because when I worked, I had 8 professors of medicine and surgery in my office, and I took all I wanted. They thought they had a joke, laughing and say, if it doesn't hurt Jerry, it won't hurt the patients. If it doesn't kill Jerry, it won't hurt the patients. And we thought that was real funny, but it almost knocked me off at one point. I was unconscious for quite a while, but I don't think that legalizing drugs, the American public does everything that makes them feel good in excess. And it doesn't make any difference whether it's golf or pills. The golfer goes out and golfs when he shouldn't be going, in the rain or the leg hurts or so forth. We are driving people. Is that wrong? Not if we can control it. But the thing is that with medication, if one is good, 5 might be better. And we don't. I don't think you can legalize those things and not say, look out for the swinging doors. And I think we have to do a little more with alcohol than we're doing. The thing is that the desire to get that wonderful change of mood. Oh, I was gorgeous when I was drinking. I danced divinely. I could roller skate. Oh, the things I could do. And I almost killed myself and went over the fence with... I told 2 men I was a professional roller skater, and I went roller skating with them, one on each arm, and lost my balance and went over the fence, and they went with me, and we had 3 broken noses. No, I think it's very dangerous. I don't think we have as much control of some of the drugs as we should have. They think they're non-habit forming. To those of us who have the physique that is habit forming, and we do everything in excess. We work in excess. We drive cars in excess. We're driving people successful, yes, if we can control it to a moderate degree. If we are aware of what is happening and say, okay, this is what's happening, this is what I can do, this is what I will do. I need help. Where do I get it? And you folks are some of the places that they get it. But you have to have the courage to listen them through, give them some exercises about writing down the possibilities of what their decisions might bring, and then help them to think they are making their own decision, which is a positive one. That's the skill of the counselor, making the patient think the decision is theirs when it's the right decision. They like to think that it works. You say, well, I have to be honest. Well, you can shut your mouth. You don't have to open it. You don't have to say everything you're thinking. You know, you learn a great deal by keeping your mouth shut and listening to what people say. Let them talk, they'll talk themselves right into the grave.
Yes. Thanks, Mrs. Delaney. I'm David Logan, an alcoholic from Cincinnati. I think it's a wonderful talk you're giving, and I'd like to know if you'd be willing to say anything about managed care from your historical perspective.
Would I be willing to say anything about managed care? I would like to take a knife and cut their throats. This managed care is a money-making deal. And don't you forget it, and I'd just soon tell them as look at them. But there are other things that are money-making too besides managed care. But the thing is that the health field, in my opinion, is in a shambles at this point, where the insurance is not paying where it should, and I'm not talking about addiction. I'm talking about across the board. You'd be surprised. The things they won't pay for or do pay for. The whole insurance and health field needs looking at in depth, in my opinion, because it will come, but I hope it doesn't ruin all of us before it does, because this managed care is something else again. And the doctors are on the fence about what to do about it. We can't blame them entirely either, because they, like everybody else, have to have an income. And but this is a sticky wicket. I'm hoping that it will blow up in their face in the near future, although I don't see the signs of it that I'd like to see. But what are we going to do in the meantime? We're going to handle it one day, 1 hour, 1 minute at a time as best we can. And if you're not going to accept the insurance that they have, then you're going to have to do it free or not see them. You have a choice. Chocolate and vanilla, and we're out of chocolate. You get a nail to the cross. The insurance field, in my opinion, is in terrible shape now. Is it going to get better? I think so. When people get angry enough that they push them push back. We are not the people that need to do the pushing back. It's the industry people that need to get on their back if they have their own insurance or whatever it is. And yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Delaney. My name is Kevin Taylor. I'm an alcoholic. And I had always thought, I had heard that Bill Wilson had said at times that he never thought that AA would be destroyed from the outside. Do you see that that's...
That I didn't hear.
That Bill Wilson had said when he was alive that Alcoholics Anonymous would not be destroyed from without, that we would be destroyed from within? Is that a true statement, and do you see anything happening?
I doubt that is a true statement. Although I think in the early days, everybody was so afraid something wasn't going to go through that they said some silly things. But Bill and Lois spent the weekends at my brother's house in Maplewood, where I also lived, for quite a good many years. And Lois was my closest friend until she died. And Bill would listen quietly. And I would ask him what you did about that thing. I wouldn't say AA. And he'd say, Jerry, don't drink. Don't take those pills. Go to meetings. And he'd hesitate. And in a very loud voice, he'd say, shut up and listen. Nasty man. That's what I called him. But Bill was laid back unless he had a real interest in something. And you would have liked Bill. He wasn't a wishy-washy, but he would listen to what you had to say. And we were fortunate because he was sent to see my brother. I called a child psychiatrist, and he said he'd heard Bill at a medical meeting in New York a couple of months before doing something funny with men who drank too much, and he called him up. And he came out that afternoon to Maplewood from New York to see Oscar, and he never drank again. Oscar never drank again.
Do you see many changes in the program now as compared to back then?
Yes, I do. It was a family program in those days. The whole family went. Then if you had a problem, you went to a coffee shop or to somebody's house, and women were in one room and the men were in another. Even the children went to meetings, and they were speakers' meetings. And let me tell you something. I recommend speakers' meetings to all of you. When they're discussion meetings, you're sitting around thinking what you're going to say, not what you're going to learn. And if you're like I was, you had to go to learn. And when I go to these group meetings, I very often am challenged on why I don't talk. And I tell them I came to listen. I go to a meeting to fill my storehouse. But if I'm sitting there thinking how I'm going to express my opinion or bring up a subject, it's not a good idea. If you have questions, get a small group together, go to the coffee shop or go to your house or something and discuss them. That's better. Yes.
When did counselors start to enter the field? When did people who were in recovery start to actually become paid professionals? At what point did people who were in recovery begin to become paid professionals counseling alcoholics? When did that actually begin? Was that part of what occurred naturally as halfway houses began to grow?
It's been up and down, all of my professional life, of when people, I think a good deal of it has to do with the area has to do with the parents, has to do with the jobs they have. We didn't have professional counselors in my day. You had to seek out people that you respected, but not necessarily, quote, counselors. I am not sure that all of the counselors in the field are equipped to do some of the things they're doing. And I think they should look at themselves and take an inventory and should decide to seek some advice themselves. You know, counselors are not God, and they don't always have the right answers because it's affected by something in their lives. We are human beings as counselors, and we need help too. Do you go to meetings? Do you go to small groups? Do you have sponsors? Do you have people that you can talk to? Take an inventory of you and decide what you need to be the best kind of a person that you can be. If you're satisfied that you are the best that you can be, I strongly suspect you're lying. Because each and every one of us need to grow. Me and thee. And I certainly need help myself and have off and on in my life. I would have killed my husband if I hadn't had some help. But I didn't kill him. I'm sorry to report that he drank after 20 years after taking those pills and killed him. He was in 14 hospitals in 17 months. He bled to death of esophageal varices alone in the halfway house.
Hi, I'm Barbara, and I'm chemically dependent. My question is, what do you believe about how we treat women? And do you think that there's something that we need to do different for our women in the field? And do you have any recommendations?
You're not going to like what I say.
I'm real anxious to hear what you say.
Women are people. And you know, I don't care whether you're man or a woman. It is who you are and what you're thinking, rather than what your sex is. Oh yes, men try to sell us the Brooklyn Bridge, but I bought it. I had 3 husbands and killed them all. I often say that I always liked men better than women ever since I found out they were different. But you know, seriously, men need help and women need help. There's no difference in the sex has that much to do with it. In the people that I have counseled over the years, I've had as many men as women. And their problems are very much the same. They haven't really taken an honest look at themselves and know who they are and what they need and how they're going to get it. And it doesn't make any difference what your sex is. You say, oh, well, men are shy about doing this or women are overbearing. That's true. That's true. But if you find that out, when you take a look at yourself in your inventory, do you want to do something about it? Or do you want to continue to suffer?
Do you believe that they should be treated separately? Would you put them in separate...
separately? What do you mean by separately?
Separate units, separate houses? Or do you believe in co-ed treatment?
I don't think that they ought to be in treatment centers together, because there's something that the Lord gave us about the desire, you know, that sexual desire. Maybe you've heard about it. And you put them there and encourage it and put on the heat, honey, you're going to have trouble. And if they're married, that's even worse. But it's bad enough if they're single, because they often get mixed up with somebody that they don't really know and don't really need in their lives. When you're in a place to get sober and straighten out your life, put sex in the icebox. It's a good place for it to freeze. You say, well, you married an alcoholic. Yeah, I met him at the North Newark group. And he took me out to dinner the following Monday, and we never saw anyone else again. But I was fortunate. Other people aren't that lucky. But I was in love. When love is understanding whether I approve or not. And I was in love with that man. And he was the last man in the world that I should have married. Roman Catholic, came complete with aged mother as a package. My father was hard shell Baptist. I was divorced twice. I mean, after all, you don't mix those two too well. But I loved him the day I met him. I loved him the day he died. And he drank after the 20 years. And I still love him because I understand that the pills activated his desire. And he returned to the drug of choice. And alcohol is a drug. But just don't get them mixed up. Just keep them separate. Get sober. Be sober a year. And then take a look. And if you have friends close to you, talk to them about it. It's getting late and somebody's going to hit me in the head if I don't stop talking. I can't hear you.
2 more. Do you want to take 2 more?
I'm not. I'm
okay.
I'm not going any place. I've got a driver when I go home.
We want you to take 2 more.
You tell me when.
Thank you for being here, Mrs. Delaney.
Talk
I guess you can hear me now. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I run into a lot of people in AA who bemoan the fact that treatment is so easy to get now and talk about the good old days when they had the wet drunks to work on. And yet my understanding of the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous was that they would have liked to send people to treatment, but there wasn't anywhere to send them. What is your experience of that?
Well, I come from the good old days, and there weren't Towns Hospital. Dr. Silkworth and I had a few arguments. Bill only made it 3 times, and I made it 7 in there, and it didn't do any good. The good old days are for the birds, my friend. It was hard going then, but there were more people for every new one. There were more people to help with the calling them on the telephone. I had a girl out in Ohio tell me she had 13 pigeons, and she made them call her every day. And I wrote her that if she'd have waited for me to call, I'd have been dead. I had 2 sponsors, both named Helen, and they called me every day and sometimes twice a day. And we went to meetings every night. When there were fewer people and fewer meetings, we had to do more driving to get there and driving to get home. And that isn't bad. Gas was short. We'd fill the cars full, and we had a meeting going, and a meeting there, and a better meeting coming home. And we went every single night. Now, in my day, we had to go to Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey to get a meeting every night. There weren't that many groups. The fact that they're so easy to get to may be a detriment. They say, oh, well, I'll go to one tomorrow, and I don't really have to go. But we knew that our lives were at stake. And if you have somebody that you're trying to help get sober, take them every single night to a meeting. And it won't hurt you either. Might even do you some good. And, there are too many people getting drunk after they've been to AA now. And it's because we're not giving them enough personal attention. If they had another kind of a disease, we might give them more. But we say, well, they can put the drink down. Well, if you have strawberry itch, you don't eat strawberries again. Oh, once in a while you try them, and then you get in trouble again. But that's more uncomfortable. But I believe that going to the meetings with this philosophy is the greatest thing to ever happen to us. A lot of the things that have happened to me in my life wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been alcoholic. And a lot of you, which one in this room would I have met without being an alcoholic? Nobody. You see, we don't stop to talk about the advantages of being an alcoholic. We want to think, oh, pour me a drink. You know? And we have to be very careful about that. I don't know whether that answers your question or not.
My name is Tony Crossley, and I am a very grateful alcoholic as you are. Since we need all the help we can get, I'd like to know who your favorite politicians are today. If you have any.
I've got news for you. I didn't know what politics were. I'd been drunk so long. Nor did I care. Now I can be a citizen that is responsible. And I can look at the candidates for various offices. But when I was coming off a drunk for a long time, I don't know about you, but I was fuzzy. I didn't admit it, nor did I know it for about the first 5 years. I thought I was fine. Compared to what? Compared to what I should be or what I was. And I was a wild and woolly woman. You'll admit that. He's nodding his head. I'm not going to tell you how woolly I was. Well, you know, you've been a wonderful, happy group. I want to say to the halfway house activists, as I call you, thank you, because you make it possible for people to have a decent life. Some of us need to start. We need to do more with these families again and again and again. I can't help but say they've been badly hurt, and they're not going to get well overnight, and they're not going to get well without some help. You say, well, there's Al-Anon. There needs to be even more help than Al-Anon. They need to go to open meetings of AA. They need to be talked to. They need to have sponsors. They need help. And I'm not just talking about women. They seem to ignore the husbands of the women alcoholic as though they didn't have any feelings. And they wonder why they chase around with some bitch that's available. I know why they chase them. I'm not, as I say, I killed 3 husbands. We've got a lot to do. And in the halfway house, it simply means that they've gone a long distance, that the families are apart like this, or the families are non-existent, or something like this. And we have to look at the histories of these people carefully. You know, what they give you as a history when they come in, what they give you as a history a year later, and 5 years after that, you would never know it belonged to the same person. Yes, you say, but they lie. They don't always know they're lying. They have told themselves these lies so often they believe it themselves. We've got a great group to work with, these people in the halfway houses. I've seen a lot of them get well and do wonderfully well, thanks to people like you. You keep on doing what you're doing, but in addition, do one thing more. Yes. That 12-stepping your own family is not a theory. It's a murder wish. You see, we cannot be objective about those closest to us. When my husband got drunk after 20 years, he'd ask me things, and I'd say, I don't know. He said, you're stupid. I said, yeah, I know. But you know, I couldn't be objective. I'm a professional. I love that man. I could have killed him 100 times. But I couldn't be objective. And I said, see, whoever it was he was seeing, some of the men that he was going out with. And I had to do that with some of the women, tell them to talk to their sponsor about what they're doing, to get out to meetings themselves. If they were non-alcoholic, to take a look at themselves and really know that the spouse is the last one to be able to help the spouse. The very last. Why? Because love is understanding whether we approve or not. But we're so close, we can't understand. Why? Why me? Did you ever say, why not me? Do you drink yourself? You stink just as bad as they did, and they come in sober, and you're, well, I only had one or two. That doesn't keep you from doesn't make you not smell. You smell. You stink. I believe families should stop drinking. Why is it so important for a family to have booze and or medication? Open somebody's medicine cabinet. You think you got a drugstore. Well, I don't take those anymore. Well, throw them out. They deteriorate in the heat in the bathroom. There are a lot of things that the non-alcoholic spouse does without thinking. Think it through. Go to AA meetings, go to Al-Anon meetings, go for counseling, anything that will help. And not much has been said about your spiritual use of your pastor or priest as a counselor. But you know, an awful lot of these boys are recovering alcoholics. They might be a help to you. And you might get down on your knees. I used to always get on my knees to pray. But about a year or so ago, I was crawling around on the floor trying to find something to pull myself up on. So I decided, I said, Lord, there ain't going to be any more knees tonight. And he said, okay. He sent the word to you if you're as old as I am. Okay.
With love and respect, I'd like to, I guess, refute that in that I believe in intervention. Because I believe intervention can work for family members.
with their own children, with their own spouses, because it's worked for me. It's what I do. It's what I believe in. And I respect you because you've also treated a lot of my patients and done a great job. But I also believe my kids are alive because I said no more and did an intervention and insisted on recovery and promised to take it to wherever it had to go, that they had to be well or they had to be on the street. And my young one today has 14 years because I was crazier than he was, and that's what he tells me.
Oh, I know.
He is clean because he knows I would have done whatever it took to keep him alive.
You know, that's very true. You forget that my husband drank after 20 years. But I found I was the last one to be able to help him. But I had to help myself to keep my big fat mouth shut. Now, if Al-Anon didn't do it, a counselor did, or a priest, or a clergyman, somebody that I respected. And I don't think there's anything wrong with us seeking help wherever we can find it, if it's somebody that we can trust. There are lots of counselors now. In my day, there weren't any. But there's some good counselors now and some not so good counselors who are biased on one thing or another. They've gone into counseling for the wrong reason. But there's a lot of good ones. And if you can get help, I don't care where you get it from. It don't make any difference. I'm not fussy about where you get help. Just get help. And you can get help several different places. And you can learn to look at yourself through different people, through Al-Anon meetings, through counselors, through clergy, through doctors. Some of the doctors now, the international doctors in AA are doing a lot with the medical profession now. Then they need a lot done, incidentally. I spoke last summer at the IDAA here in New Jersey, and I go after them because the first group met in my kitchen. And I'm not very easy on them because I think they need to know what AA is all about, and they need to look at themselves. There are a lot of drunk doctors, and there's a lot of drunk nurses, and there's a lot of drunk businessmen and women and housewives and secretaries. You know, this disease doesn't have any preference of what you do for a job. It wants to know what you're doing with your life, in your mind, in your heart, and your soul. It wants you well. God is good. He gives you good, orderly direction if you let Him. If you let Him. But I can't make you. We can only tell you about it and hope things will be better. Whoever asked that question, I've got a throwaway here. Ways to cope with stress and reach your goals. I think I've got some more of those. Don't I have, Jim? I'll put them up here and you can swap them around.
Mrs. Delaney, we would like to present you with a plaque.
Oh.